Welcome to the Antiquities Travel Guide. Follow us to different countries as we search for ancient artifacts. If you too wish to explore the ancient past through travel, we'll help you plan where to go, what to see, and how to best enjoy what you encounter. In this series of the ATG, you can accompany Mariza and me on our trek through England, homeland of the ancient Angles, Saxons, Romans, and Celtic Britons. Come on, let's go! Mariza and I stayed at a cute little Airbnb outside Durham called the My Way Guest House. It was clean and comfortable, the hosts were very nice, and a continental breakfast came along with it. We even got to say hello to the horses in the backyard. It was a bit chilly outside, so it was good that the horses were responsible enough to wear their jackets. This is the day we finally made it to the territory in which Hadrian's Wall was constructed. Oh, I had been waiting for this. We visited 3 important ancient sites. First, Arbeia, in what is now South Shields, which although not situated on the wall itself, was an important supply center for the troops stationed on the wall. Second, Segedunum, the easternmost fort on Hadrian's Wall, which today is found in the appropriately named town of Wallsend. Third, Cilurnum, which served as an important cavalry fort on the wall. Today it goes by the name of Chester's Fort.
Right now, I'm standing outside of the Arbeia Roman fort, which also happens to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site. This fort was a key military and supply base to Hadrian's Wall and other important forts along the wall.
Arbeia sat right on the coast in northeast England. Its fort was built by the Romans in 160 to guard the mouth of the River Tyne. And once the wall was built, though it was not physically attached to the wall didn't come this far east, it was a supply base for the wall. Around 208, it was reorganized with additional granaries that could feed up to 50,000 men for 2 months. The grain would be transported up the river on barges, and from there, it was taken to the forts along the wall. One of the first things you notice when walking up is the huge gate, which originally stood on the western end of the Roman fort in Arbeia. This is a full-scale reconstruction which helps visitors to visualize what the gate actually looked like. It sits right on the spot of the original gate, and you can even go inside of it. Halt! Who goes there? You can also see the foundations of the granaries, headquarters building, and barracks on the site. One of the barrack buildings also is reconstructed in full size. Many of the troops stationed here came from the furthest reaches of the empire. A squadron of specialist boatmen who had worked on the Tigris River came all the way from Mesopotamia to assist here. A squadron of Spanish cavalry also lived here. The commander of the fort himself was from the Near East, but he very much wanted to be seen as Roman, and his house, the remains of which are also here, was constructed very much in the Roman style, although its numerous heating devices suggest perhaps that he was not crazy about the climate here. As was often done when forts were constructed, a vicus, in this case the settlement of Arbeia, grew next to the fort. The primary purpose of the vicus would have been to serve and maintain the economic and social needs of the local garrison, providing goods and services. The people who lived there would initially have consisted of the wives, children, and slaves of the soldiers, as well as members of the native community, mostly traders, craftsmen, innkeepers, and sex workers, who would take up residence in the vicus in exchange for protection and profit. The population expanded from there. The site is managed by Tyne and Wear Archives and Museums on behalf of South Tyneside Council. It's free to get in and free roadside parking is available. Even though the remains are scanty, we put this in our category 2 because of the reconstructed buildings, decent museum, and effort made by the people running it to make it educational and fun. Next, we drove a short distance to Wallsend, to the site of ancient Segedunum, the last fort on the eastern end of Hadrian's Wall. Hadrian's Wall, as you may know, for a time formed the northernmost border of the Roman Empire. But why was it constructed? The Emperor Hadrian after whom it is named, said simply that it was, quote, to separate Romans from barbarians, unquote. There are some indications that between 119 and 121 CE, a rebellion against Roman rule had occurred in Britain, and that troops had been sent there to restore order, but we don't have much more detail than that. The Emperor Hadrian visited Britain in 122, and it was during that visit that he gave the order to have the wall built. Some speculate that its purpose was less for security and more to cut down on defense costs. Others say it was used as a deterrent to the Roman governors of Britain to engage in expansionist campaigns. In the same year, Hadrian appointed his friend, Aulus Platorius Nepos, as governor, and it was he who oversaw the construction of the wall, which took about 6 years to complete. The wall ended up being 80 Roman miles in length. Hadrian didn't stick around for all that. He left by the end of 122, but before he departed, we do know he had a shrine erected in Eboracum, York, which was dedicated to Britannia, the divine personification of Britain. About 10 years after the wall was completed, the succeeding emperor, Antoninus Pius, pushed Roman forces further north and had a new wall built, the Antonine Wall as we call it. It would replace Hadrian's Wall as the new defensive barrier of the Romans, but it lasted only about 20 years, and after that, the Romans retreated back to Hadrian's Wall. Then in the early 3rd century, Septimius Severus once again took his forces north to reman the Antonine Wall. But this effort to re-establish it as the northern boundary failed. Hadrian's Wall, therefore, was in use for much longer than the Antonine Wall. It was eventually abandoned when the Roman administration let Britain go in the early 5th century. It was cold and rainy as we arrived at the Segedunum Roman fort and museum. Segedunum, which translates to Victory Fort, is the most thoroughly excavated fort on Hadrian's Wall. You can get a bird's eye view of it from the viewing platform. If you see mortared stone blocks, those are the actual remains. But where you see cobblestones and curbstones, those are not original. They're there to mark where the original walls used to be.
So we're at the ancient site of Segedunum, also known as Wallsend. And the reason it's called that is because this was where Hadrian's Wall actually ended here on the east side. Behind me, as you can see, there's the old fort where the garrison was stationed. And below us, they have museums and a lot of exhibits and a lot of stuff for the kids.
The Segedunum fort was built in 127 during the construction of the wall, but it was not originally intended to be the easternmost fort. Pons Aelius was supposed to be where the wall ended, but it was realized within a few years that this left an opening for the enemy, and so the wall was extended a bit further to Segedunum. The wall extension was considerably narrower than the rest of the wall. We know that the original resident legion was drafted mainly from what is now Belgium. In the 3rd and 4th centuries, the legion was drafted chiefly from the Alsace region of France. At its peak, the fort held 480 infantry and 120 cavalry, some 600 men. The settlement of Segedunum, Avicis, developed around the fort, some of the residences even being built north of the wall. We believe the fort was occupied all the way up to the Roman withdrawal of Britain in the year 410. But in the last few years, there probably was only a skeleton crew manning the fort. We put this site in Category 3, as there wasn't much left of the fort to see. The museum at Segedunum is geared mostly towards children, so you won't really get any in-depth information about the fort from the galleries, but although we didn't eat there, word has it that the food at the canteen is very good. At Newcastle University is the Great North Museum, which we heard had a collection of ancient artifacts. The area is under construction, so it took us a while to find somewhere to park, but we were glad we made it.
So right now, I'm outside of Newcastle University's Great North Museum. The special thing about this museum is it has an entire room dedicated to Hadrian's Wall, including tombstones and altars and just a lot of interesting fun facts.
The Roman collection was especially fine, but the Greek materials were also worth seeing, as well as the Egyptian. Cilurnum, the next stop on our road trip, is considered to be the best preserved Roman cavalry fort along Hadrian's Wall. The site guarded a bridge, Chester's Bridge, carrying the Military Way Roman road behind the wall across the river North Tyne. An original bridge was constructed in Hadrian's time, A second bridge, built in the 160s, was wide enough to carry the military way across the time on 4 arches and had guard towers on each bank. Massive abutments survive of this bridge across the river from the fort. This is the eastern bridge abutment and tower of Chester's Bridge. In 2016, public access to the bridge abutments was suspended due to flood damage. The most impressive building remains are those of the headquarters building, Latin Principia, in the middle of the fort. Here's the cross hall with the dais at the far end. This would originally have been a roofed building in which the soldiers would have paraded to be addressed by the commanding officer who stood on the dais at the far end. I'm standing here in the strong room of the fort. And this is the best preserved section of the fort, so it's the most exciting part. You can see the roof here is still intact. The strong room, of course, is where they kept all their valuables, the treasury. And it would be locked up very tight. Right next to it was the shrine, and they believed that by putting the shrine and the strong room right next to each other, the sacredness of the shrine would make an added level of protection for the strong room. Next door to the Principia is the commanding officer's house, the Praetorium in Latin. That's because the commanding officer was known as the praetor. Numerous hypocausts were under the floors, so it must have been quite a cozy house. Yeah, you can kind of get an idea for the hypocausts. This would have all been full of hot air. This is cool. That was holding up the floor too. This is a Category 2 archaeological site on our scale. There's more here to see of the actual Roman ruins than either Arbeia or Segedunum.
And although it's hard to see just how big this place is, it actually housed about 500 men and their horses.
There's a small museum attached to the fort, as well as a place to grab a bite. It was exciting to get a taste for what it was like for people who lived along Hadrian's wall in Roman times. But our exploration of the wall and its environs was not over. We still haven't actually seen or touched the wall itself. I'm saving that for next episode. If you're interested in seeing that, and in our visit to Vindolanda, probably the greatest of all archaeological sites in Britain, please subscribe to the channel and click on the little bell icon, and you'll be notified as soon as it's posted. Thanks for joining us on our adventure. We'll see you next time.